went to my closing slide for a minute there. All right. Well, hey everyone. Let's see what we have going on. Yeah, it looks like everything's good here. So I'm gonna get going. Wow, it's been a week. All right, so today we are continuing this little series of Adobe Animate introductory concepts. Last time we did some work with frame-by-frame animation, and today we're going to look at shape tweens. So looking at actual tweening engines inside of Animate. So I've got a document opened right here in Animate, and it's just at a normal 16:9 aspect ratio, 1280 by 720, right? Black background, 24 frames per second. So what we want to do is animate something here. And I'm thinking what I want to animate is just animate like a drop of liquid falling into a puddle, right? So something pretty simple, but not as simple as, let's say, like a ball rolling down a hill or a bouncing ball or something like that. Those are the most simple kind of concepts, and those are the ones I actually, recommend people start out with, but I want to keep this interesting too. I don't want it to be like, super simple. So what I'm going to do is start off with this tool right here. This is the rectangle tool. If you remember last time we were using the fluid brush and classic brush and so forth. So I'm going to actually create these shapes with some of these shape tools here. And when you select a tool inside of Animate, you get properties, and you get properties for the tool, and then you have properties for object, frame, and document properties. Any of these that are highlighted, you can just click between them to adjust those particular properties. And the properties, obviously change between which tool is selected. So, if I was to select a brush again, I get all sorts of properties for that brush. So what I want to do, actually, let's make this interesting. Let's make this red. And I'm going to turn the stroke off and check my grid and guides here. So my snapping, and let's snap to grid and click and drag to create my sort of initial pool right here, right? So I'm going to rename this layer, just double click the layer name, call this pool, and lock it down. I'm going to create a new layer for my drop. Let's call it a droplet. I always like those words that end in like that, like droplet. It's like a little drop. So let's go ahead and think about what we want to do here. I want it to start up above. So what we're gonna do is go, I don't know, 50%? Yeah. I mean, we could do 60%, and maybe we could see it a little bit bigger. And then we can just scroll like this. And there we go. So now we see everything, but we can also manipulate things up on top of the pasteboard here. So the first thing I'm gonna do is select, instead of my rectangle tool, my oval tool. And think about how big I want this to be. So if I hold down my shift key, that's pretty good. Shift key, click and drag, I create a perfect circle right there. And I want this to be centered. So I'm gonna select it. We can see it's an object of type shape. And we've got our position and our size here. So it's 30 by 30 pixels. And it's the same red color as the pool down here. So I'm going to open up my alignment settings. I want to align to stage. And let's align to the top center of the stage right there. With that done, I can hold down my shift key and bump my arrow keys up until it's completely off stage and onto the pasteboard. So with it up on the pasteboard, we'll be able to have it drop down into the greater pool and then, you know, animate some additional things around that, right? So now that we've got some introductory stuff taken care of and intros out of the way, if anybody wants to say hi in the chat, let me know what you're up to. Oh, hello, Judith. Why is the dot pixelated or not solid? So what you might have seen when I have it selected here, and also if I select this shape down here, you can see this sort of dotted pattern to it. That might be what you're referring to in terms of being pixelated. These are all vectors, right? When we create them inside of Animate. So they are, you know, they are actually vector content. The thing that's interesting about different shapes, so let's go ahead and select this shape right here. Yeah, when you select a shape inside of Animate, if it is a shape object, you will get this pattern overlaid. So you can kind of see that it's selected. It's kind of a weird thing. It might have other purposes. If it does, I'm not sure what they might be. But if you don't like that behavior, you can actually create things as a drawing object. So just as a little side path here, if I choose my oval tool again, and let's create a big shape right here, right? So we're going to delete these, but just to kind of show. So there's that. Now, if we look over here at the bottom of the toolbar, we can toggle object drawing mode on. All right. So if I toggle that on there, or in the tool settings, it's right here too, object drawing mode. If I toggle that on in either case, and then create another object right next to it, and then we choose our selection tool, we can see the first one that I created without object drawing mode shows up as this shape with this dotted pattern when I select it. And we can see over here it's a shape. If I click on this one here, you can see it's very different. This is a drawing object. A drawing object's interesting. It behaves very similar to a shape. It has a lot of the same attributes as a shape. One of the big differences is that it has a bounding box instead of this pattern. But they're really both vector shapes, right? It's just a different way of working, because if I go ahead and, oops, let's toggle that off again. So I'm going to toggle drawing mode off. And then if I drag out some additional circles and things right here, and then switch back over to my selection tool and select it, you can see that we have made a compound shape out of this. So shapes will actually combine together if you work on them in the same layer. If I toggle drawing mode back on and do the same sort of thing over here to my drawing object, you can see I can still manipulate these. They won't combine together or anything like that. Those are the main differences between drawing objects and shapes. Yeah. So let's get rid of that content right there. Yeah, so it's not exactly the active layer. It's just when you select a shape and it is a basic shape, it just kind of happens that way. That's just the behavior of Animate, right? So what we want to do here is I actually want the droplet to start a bit in. So if we look, we're at 24 frames per second, and here's the 1 second marker right here. So I want to go ahead and start this off, I don't know, maybe like 10 seconds. So if you click on a keyframe, which is indicated by this little black dot here, and then you hover over that selected keyframe, you'll notice the cursor changes to show sort of like a selection rectangle. That means that I can click and drag to relocate this keyframe. So now the little drop up here doesn't actually show up until we hit frame 15. Likewise, because we only have our little pool down here at frame 1, it doesn't show up at all after that. So if we want that to show up, what we need to do is just click on some frame in the future down the timeline. And then we can use this little widget here to insert frame up to the selected frame. And once we do that, then we've got our playhead that can scrub across all of those frames, and our little pool exists throughout the whole thing. Now you can see up top as I'm playing this back, the little dot only shows up for that keyframe, right? So if we want it to show up until the end, we can do the same thing here. Just add frames up in there. And now the little dot shows up the whole time, right? So we've got some choices here, right? What we could do is we could make the droplet fall, and we could do it frame by frame, like we were looking at last week. So if we did it frame by frame, we'd insert a frame, move the drop down a little bit, insert the frame, move the drop down, just changing it to X and Y position. But we're looking at shape tweens today, so I want to create a shape tween. So I'm gonna go to like frame 30 right here. And to create a shape tween, you need a set of 2 keyframes inside of Animate. So I need to insert a keyframe right here at frame 30 on my droplet layer. So let's go ahead and insert a keyframe right there. And there we go. So I have a keyframe here, keyframe there. So far, this is just like frame by frame animation, right? And if I select this object, then use my keyboard or my mouse, whatever you want to do, to just drop it down into our little puddle right there. Now, if we scrub, we can see it moves from the top to the bottom, but it does so instantaneously, just like a frame by frame animation, because that's what this is. So what we need to do is actually create a tween between these 2 keyframes so that it's going to automatically fill in those frames in between this keyframe and this keyframe. So we can really select any frame between 2 keyframes in order to do this. And there's a little shortcut right here. If we hold down on that drop down, we can see a couple of different tweens. And this is kind of what we're going to look at over the next couple of weeks, the remainder of November. So we're going to look at shape tweens this week. Classic tweens, I think, is next week, and then close out November with motion tweens. So I'm going to go ahead and create a shape tween out of this. And there we go. We can see it's already shifted position, right? And let's go ahead and set my looping on. Change my loop markers and just kind of play this back. All right. So this is coming out okay. It's pretty good. However, you know, it's a little weird. It's not very fast, and it doesn't have a lot of motion to it, right? So, and it doesn't change over time. So normally if something drips down, like think about raindrops, they sort of, and they're not completely like circular, right? So it's fine if it starts out like that, but let's change the shape at the bottom right here. So I'm gonna zoom in like 200% so I can really see how this looks. And then you can use lots of different things to do this. We could use the free transform tool like this, and we get these little transform rectangles here. And let's actually do that. I'm gonna hold down. Oops, nope. My option key, and just kind of pull that down like this so it's a little more elongated. Let's make it a bit bigger too. Make sure that's aligned properly. And you know, right now, let's bump it up here so we can see it against the black instead of otherwise. So you can see it's an oval right now. And there are an amazing amount of things you can do with simple shapes inside of Animate, right? I would highly suggest, if anybody hasn't seen it, to have a look at Chris Georginas's Adobe Max session on Animate. He uses just like super simple shapes to create and animate a character in like 30 minutes. and it's pretty cool. And you can find that at max.adobe.com. But what I want to show here are a couple different ways of changing the paths of your shape. So probably the easiest thing is to look at our tools here. So we have a selection tool and we have a sub-selection tool. And the sub-selection tool is only used on paths, right? So if I click on this shape, we can see the different anchor points, we can see the paths around the side, and we can see the different handles on each anchor point. So I can select these. And of course I can manipulate them as well. So if I select one and use my keyboard to go over a little bit, same thing over here. I can kind of narrow that down a little. In addition, let's zoom in a bit more here so it's more visible. There we go. We've also got the ability to adjust, just like with, you know, if you're used to the pen tool inside of Illustrator. If I hold down my Option or Alt key here, I can break each of these handles apart from one another. And what I'm able to do, of course, using these techniques, let's pop out a little bit here, 350 maybe. I find the grid distracting. So if you go in a little too far, you get to deal with the pixel grid, right? So what we're basically doing is making like a little teardrop shape. And of course, you could always just draw this with the pen tool too. I mean, I'm just manipulating a circle. That's okay. So here's another thing you can do. If you don't want to mess with anchor points, you can actually select the selection tool. And as long as you have everything deselected on that shape, when you hover over the shape, you can see the cursor changes to show a little arc near it, right? So right here, if I select, I don't get that arc. All I can do is move the shape. But if I deselect, and then hold over, I get this arc. And with the arc selected, I can click and drag to manipulate the shape in this way. So this is sometimes an easier way to do it. It all kind of depends, and you can create some interesting things by doing that, right? So let's go back out, choose Fit in Window, and I'm gonna plop this down into my pool right there. So let's have a look and see what it looks like now. All right, so we can see, if I pause this, sure enough, it starts out as a circle, right? But because this is a shape tween, shape tweens, you can manipulate all sorts of different things as part of a shape. So we can manipulate the color across keyframes. We can manipulate the shape of the shape across keyframes. We can scale it if we want to. So all sorts of different things. Maybe I'll scale this up a bit. So if I select this here, free transform tool. Oops, I'm skewing by mistake. There we go. So yeah, we're scaling this up a little bit. So it gets a little kind of bigger as it goes down. And gosh, it looks a little too fat though. So let's kind of tuck that in. All right, so the shape isn't exactly like I want it to be. If you look, it sort of looks like a football right here, which isn't that great. Let's go ahead and add some shape hints to see if we can further control this, right? So shape hints are a way to sort of mark specific points of a shape in order to constrain those points across keyframes. So if I go in here and I'm like, okay, let's go 200% again. and look at our initial shape here. And I'm going to insert or modify shape, add shape hint. So modify shape, add shape hint. That's going to add a little A right there. And I can go and put that right there. I'm going to do it again. Modify shape, add shape hint. There we get B. And right now it's trying to snap to the grid, which I don't want. So I'm going to choose view. Snapping, an uncheck snap to grid. I wanted that at first, but now I want to make sure that these points are actually aligned to specific points of the shape and not to the grid itself, right? I'm going to add a third one here. Well, let's actually add 4, because it's the bottom part that I really care about. There we go. So we got A, B, C, and D, right? There's how it looks. So if we go over to frame 30, and of course I'll have to scroll down to the bottom here. All right, at frame 30, we can see, here's our shape, right? And we've got the same corresponding points. So if I take D, let's put D right there. There's C. C belongs at the bottom. B is going to go right here. And A is going to be at the very tippity top, right? And if I did that right, which I'm questioning whether I did it right, because let's see, did that even change anything? I don't think so. Sometimes with this stuff, it does take a bit of trial and error. A, B, C, and D. Let's make these kind of closer to the bottom right here. Just group them a bit more. Counting the days. And another thing you can always do if things aren't behaving is you can add more keyframes in the middle to help guide and direct the object. It's not perfect, but I'm gonna move on because what I want to show next is a way to make the actual animation look more natural, right? Right now, it's just a very linear motion from top to bottom. I want it to sort of start out kind of slow and then pick up speed as it's falling, right? Because that's kind of how things work. So that's gonna make it look a lot cleaner, a lot more natural. So if I select any of the frames that make up this tween, and I look over into my frame properties here, I've got an entire section for tweening around my shape tween. So right now we're using what's known as a classic easing effect, and its intensity is set to 0, which makes a perfectly linear ease. So what we want to do is choose classic ease and select another easing effect. So instead of classic ease, as I said, I want it to ease in. So I'm going to choose an ease in. And then we've got a bunch of different little algorithms here that we can choose from as preset. And as you can see here, we have the ability to edit easing to create our own little presets as well. You know, I don't know, cubic might work. Let's go to cubic, see how that looks. So you can see that's looking okay. It's all right. I still have problems with the shape of my actual shape. And part of me is like, well, you know, we could always this over. So if we move the keyframe over, it's going to give me a little more time, a few more frames in there. That looks all right. We could also, of course, change the frames per second of our document. So right now we're at 24 frames per second. I could always change that to be something else, right? So if we scale spans, it'll take the same amount of time because it'll scale all the different spans we have down here. Let's kind of bring this up to 60 frames per second. All right, so now we can see we have a lot more frames down below, right? But our timing is actually going to be the same. It's just that it takes 60 frames now instead of 24 to hit that 1 second of time. Yeah, that looks a lot better to me. So this is now occurring at 60 frames per second instead of 24 frames per second. It's more than double. All right. So of course, the more frames you have in an animation, the more work you have to do to fill those frames. So it is a bit of a trade-off. If I go, let's go to 30, see how that looks. And it isn't always perfect when you scale the spans of your frames and change the FPS, simply because it needs to make changes, right? Try to fill in the gaps. Yeah, I mean 30 looks okay. None of these are going to be absolutely perfect. And of course you can use onion skinning here too. So if you wanted to see exactly how things look. And notice too, because I have that easing effect, everything up top here is very tight. So these are all very close together, these droplets. And then down at the bottom, because it's sort of easing in and getting quicker, it's sort of, you know, it travels more each time that we do this. So that's that, but I also want an interaction with the pool when the droplet hits. So let's lock both of these down. And what I'm gonna do is add another layer. I'm gonna call this ripple. And I'm gonna find, and actually let's take this up to like 80 frames here. Add in frames, there we go. Now we've got a nice big long span of frames. So here, and I'm going to turn my onion skinning off. Here what we've got is once this hits right there, makes contact with the pool, probably right here we want it to actually do something, right? We want it to start rippling from one side to the next. So to do that, let's actually turn on our outlines for the pool. And that's going to serve as a guide for us. And this is author time, so, you know, if we play this back in test movie, we're going to see the real thing here. But I want to use this as a guide to know where to place my ripples. And the ripples themselves, I'm going to create again with my oval tool as simple shapes. And what I want to have happen is I want them to just sort of start there. Oops, we don't want it to. I've got it starting in this keyframe here. Let's move that over. So I got strikes right there, and we start getting ripples. So again, here's my ripples here, and we can do tweens on these as well. So let's have those tween out to like frame 75. I don't want it to go all the way to the side, but when it does, I want it to sink below the surface again. Shape tweens can be a lot of fun, just because they are so malleable. And here we go. Let's put a shape tween in here, and then we'll make adjustments to it. So just select any of the frames between these two keyframes in my ripple layer, and again, create that shape tween. There we go. All right. And the easing effect we're going to want for this, of course, is going to be different, because we want it to start off fast and then slow down. I also want it to start off larger. So let's zoom in once again. And we got to be careful here, because we don't want these two shapes to overlap, because if they do, we're not going to be able to tween them like we're doing right now. So I'm gonna actually, let's select both of these at once. I'll shift select, and we can make these really tall. Let's put them even closer together here. A little too tall, right? That's okay. They're vectors. They can be changed very easily. And actually, let's make these a lot bigger towards the end of each of these ripples. Make sure only one is selected right there. And that's about 256 in width. So we'll do the same thing here. About 256. You don't have to be too precise, right? And again, we're going to want some easing here. So classic ease is always on by default. We want to ease out. So it'll start off really quick and then ease out. I'm going to choose cubic. Let's play it. Pretty nice. I think the stage is too big though. It's too big. Let's go ahead and change things up a little bit here. If I go to more settings, under my document settings, I want to anchor everything to, I don't know, the center here maybe. And yeah, let's just make it like 720 by 720 or something like that. I think this would make a cool animated GIF. And if we center it to the center, or yeah, to the bottom, that's fine, whatever. 720 by 720. Scale content, no, we don't need to really do that. And yeah, let's see what it looks like. Yeah, Now notice we still have stuff that's spilling out here onto our background, our pasteboard rather. We can always use this little tool up here to clip content outside the stage when we preview, but it doesn't really matter because when we play it back, you can see it kind of looks the same anyway. You know, it's not going to show the stuff on the pasteboard. Hey, hello, Reverb Mike. Welcome to the stream for today. And yeah, there's a good amount of people watching, so if you just tuned in, turned in, whatever, welcome. We're animating with shape tweens today. Just some really simple animation. Just a little drop falling into a pool. So if you were kind of a stickler for having things be the correct size, we do have this at 720 by 720, so I could always change this to 720. Ooh, don't want that to happen though. Let's unlock that and then change it to 720 in width. And use our fancy little alignment panel to align it to the center bottom. And yeah, then I don't need to clip anything. Well, those guys extend past the stage, but that's not a problem. They kind of need to sell the effect. Yeah, so this is a pretty neat little looping animation that we can create, right? So let's produce this as an animated GIF. And yeah, let's see here. Choose File and Export. And you could export this as all sorts of things, different, like an image sequence. You could export it as video. But I want an animated GIF out of this that just kind of loops forever. I think that'd be fun. Oh, of course it opened up on my other screen here. All right. Phew, that's big. So I've got this screen that I present on at like 1600 by 900. So the UI is nice and big. You can see here, this isn't what we want, right? So what can happen with animated GIF, and we want to fit on screen, there we go, is sometimes like if you have a transparent background, right, it'll actually render that transparency. So make sure that that's off. And this doesn't always update very well. So sometimes, you know, just tweaking some of these settings over here will assist with that, right? So if we scroll down, we can see we've got a number of different colors here. Animated GIF, as you probably all know, is constrained to 256 colors in its color table. We've got looping. We can set it to loop once or forever. And we can preview it. Pretty nice. And we could always change the size here too if we wanted, but I'm going to keep it at 720 by 720. Let's go ahead and hit save. And we'll just save that as shape.gif. And there it goes. It goes ahead and saves that for us right there. Let's check that out. Yeah, so there's my little GIF, and it'll just loop, 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 loop. Very calming. Yeah. So again, this little series is mostly around, you know, very introductory concepts inside of Animate. For those people who aren't used to it, or who want to pick it up, or, you know, might be a little intimidated by some of the things you can do in Animate. And we're just walking through this month different tweening types. So let me open up my there we go. So live streams, let's go to work. So if you go to my page on Behance, you can find my schedule right here. and I try to keep this up to date. This is what we did today. Animate introductory concepts for shape tweens. And next week we're gonna do classic tweens, and then the week after we're gonna do something with motion tweens. So what we make every time, you know, is just something I kind of like, you know, I just kind of decided this little droplet idea like 15 minutes before going live, right? But sometimes I prepare stuff the night before, sometimes a few hours before. But yeah, we'll do some cool stuff with classic tweens next time and see the difference, right, between classic tweens and shape tweens. And then finish off November with motion tweens. So yeah, I don't know. We're kind of trying this with the education featured streamers. We're all kind of trying to plan things and get the different product managers and so forth, social media managers for different products on board with getting the word out about these streams, but you know, it hasn't quite happened yet, so we are working on it. But anyway, I appreciate everybody joining today, and yeah, that's it for the stream today. So we did about 45 minutes, which is pretty good. I don't like to go much over that. Like an hour is probably a bit much, but yeah, especially for these introductory things, they should be pretty digestible. All right, well, everyone have a nice day and a nice week.